All right. So thank you all for joining us today. This is NSBP's Black History Month interview. This is the second one that we've had for 2025, and we are very gracious and we want to welcome Dr. Peter Delfyett. So I have an introduction for him, and then we will get to some questions. So Dr. Delfyett is from Queens, New York, and graduated from City College in New York City with a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering in 1981, and did a master's at the University of Rochester in 1983 before going back to graduate school and University Center of the City of New York to receive a PhD in 1988. Dr. Delfyett has several patents and accomplishments. He was able to invent the world's most powerful and fastest mode-locked semiconductor laser diode. He demonstrated an optically distributed clocking network for high-speed digital switches and supercomputer applications, and he pioneered the first observation of optical nonlinearity induced by cooling of highly excited electron hole pairs in semiconductor optical amplifiers. Since 1993, Dr. Delfyett has been a faculty at the University of Central Florida. He has several accolades and awards, including being a fellow of the American Physical Society, and he has received the Black Engineer of the Year Award, the American Physical Society Boucher Award, the Arthur Schlallow Prize for Laser Science from the American Physical Society, and he is a National Academy of Inventors Fellow. So we are very excited to have you, Dr. Delfyett. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Alan. It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to talk to everybody out there.
No problem. So thanks so much. And I just wanted to get a little bit more information on you growing up. So we just talked and we're both from New York, but could you describe living in New York City as a child and how you were molded into being first interested in science?
Sure. Well, New York City is sort of an urban area, and my family has been in Queens for almost 200 years.
Mhm.
But so growing up in that urban area, you, in some sense, grow up quickly. You watch not just the local news, but the national news. I think you have as a kid, you're exposed to so many different aspects of different cultures growing up in New York in terms of what's going on in the world. That sort of exposure I thought was quite useful for me, in terms of becoming who I am. That's number one. Of course, as a kid, you like to play basketball. That's sort of how it was in my neighborhood. The pecking order of the guys in the neighborhood was based upon how good your basketball game was. That's sort of how it was back in the day. Um, but getting to the other part, which how did that mold me for getting into science? So as a kid, I was raised by my dad and my father's parents, my paternal grandparents, and my grandfather, who was I think just barely eighth grade educated, had a job at a chemical company out on Long Island, Powers Chemical Company, and so he would see how all of the highly paid chemical engineers would be, but he would also recognize that it was folks like himself who had less education that was really making the wheels turn. And so my grandfather would try to encourage my curiosity. And so as a kid, I'm talking 5 or 6 years old, he would sit me on his lap and he would take out the New York Times and we would read science articles together. And so we kind of go along and sound out the words, and this was sort of a nice bonding time with for me and my grandfather. And I think that quality time with him certainly helped to spur my interest in science. Then as I became in first grade, the articles that my grandfather would pick out would be either based on astronomy, things going out in space, stuff like that, because it's very, very interesting, or it'd be articles about dinosaurs and stuff like that. And, as a kid, 5 and 6 years old, I was a good kid. I'd go to church on Sunday, but I would, challenge the Sunday school teacher, how come Noah didn't put the dinosaurs on the ark? And I was never happy with the answers that I got.
Understood.
And so coming along, it's sort of that whole experience taught me that there are, in fact, questions out there that we really didn't have answers to, that people really didn't have answers to certain questions. You know, when you're a kid, you want to know something, you ask your mother, your father, your grandparents, and then you keep pushing the question. Eventually, they get to a point where they say, gee, I don't know. And the light bulb goes off and says, oh, you mean you really, there's something you don't know. And so these kinds of things, I think, inspired me to go in an area where there were the things which were unknown. And that sort of made it exciting for me to be able to think that I could discover something or figure out something that nobody else knew. That was very appealing to me. I think that's how I got into science. Started as an early kid.
Okay, wow, that makes sense. Yeah, it seems that there's a pattern that a lot of scientists have very early experiences with being introduced to science by family or school. So that's wonderful to hear that, you had that intimate experience. So I wanted to move to sort of college. So can you describe your experience with education within City College? I know that City College has been a very changing landscape in New York City. And then could you refer to you bounced from City College to Rochester and then back. And then
Correct.
does that have to do anything with your PI? I read your PI was Robert Alfano, and then I believe he also advised Dr. Anthony Johnson of NSBP as well, right?
That is correct. That is correct. So let me give you the kind of the whole story. And so uh, I really wanted to go to school for music because I'm a drummer, right? I
Right.
wanted to do that. And so, but there was a lot of family guidance, I think, which sort of suggested, gee, that's wonderful, but be careful because if you get a music degree, what are you going to do,
Mm.
etc. So I said, okay, gee, I see what's going on here. So I said, maybe I should go to school for like to become a studio or a recording engineer, because I'm
Mm.
thinking, gee, engineer, that sounds something reasonable that the family would accept, but it would at least give me an opportunity to sort of be close to music. And so my sisters and I were all basically a year apart. It was destined that we were going to be going to the city university schools, Queens College, Baruch College, the City College in my case, because they were the free schools. My dad didn't have a lot of money to send us away, to a fancy school with room and board and all of that. So we're going to the free school. So basically, at City College, they didn't have a recording engineering degree. They had electrical engineering. So now
Right.
I'm thinking, okay, well, at least in electrical engineering, they're the guys that design the instruments that the studio engineers make. So you can see I'm slowly evolving. So
Right.
now I'm in engineering, taking all the calc and the physics and all of that stuff, and I'm in the first maybe my junior year, and I'm starting to look at what possible um, elective courses I might take. And so I was taking electromagnetics already at the time, and I'm reading in the list of courses. There was one course, Introduction to Lasers and Masers, and I read the course description, and the last line said something like, "This course will also teach about the fundamental principles of fiber optic communication." So now this is around 1979, and I thought to myself, that area is going to be the thing of the future. And if I were to somehow get an advanced degree in that, that will carry me through a career,
Mm.
which is ultimately what I did. So now I took a look at what courses would be required for that to take the laser course, and it said electromagnetics. So I said, okay, check, I'm taking that. But it also said another course to take would be the modern optics class in the physics department, and I'm a double E. I said, oh, okay, let me do that. So I went and took the physics course, and who was the instructor? Professor Robert Alfano,
I
right?
see.
And so I walk into the class that first day, and this is a classic physics class where there's four people in the class. All right. He looks at the audience and he says, I know you, I know you, I know you. Who are you? And he's pointing to me because I'm the electrical engineer. So he says, oh, I'm Pete Delfyett. I'm a double E. So he said, oh, double E's, they're turkeys. Get out of here. He was only joking, but it sort of showed to me a sort of a, it's kind of the way that my uncles would deal with me when I was growing up with my grandparents. So I felt very much at home. Okay, so now took his class and all of that. I took the laser class, and I want to go to graduate school. And you know, I wanted to work in this area of ultrafast optics. And I asked Professor Alfano about the options. He said, "Well, this is back maybe in 1980. I'm getting ready to apply." And he was a physics professor, and I'm an electrical engineering student. And it would be not possible for me to get a PhD in electrical engineering being advised by a faculty in physics. This is so many long time ago, they did not have joint appointments. So
Mm,
that was sort of not allowable. I said, well, gee, I'll do the PhD in physics. But then the problem is you need to pass the PhD qualifying exam, which means you
right.
need to have the entire physics undergrad curriculum under your belt, plus the grad courses that you would take. And so that would almost mean going back and trying to get the undergraduate degree in physics as well. So that didn't seem like a smart move. And so I applied to graduate school and got in at the University of Rochester. When I applied in my statement of objectives, I mentioned I wanted to do, ultra fast lasers. It was very much focused on doing optics and photonics, or at least what we call photonics today. And so I was admitted, and I get up there, and on the first day, we're trying to develop what my courses of studies are. And he said, well, what do you want to take? So I said, oh, I want to take optics course one, optics course two, optics course three, blah, blah, blah. So they said, gee, that's fine and dandy, but you need to pass the PhD exam in double E. So we think you need to take these courses. So this is in my first week there, right? So I'm like,
Wow.
oh, oh, that's different. And
Right.
of course I take the double E courses, and I pass the PhD exam, etc. But it comes, I'm not the qualifying exam, move to candidacy. Um, but I really wanted to do optics. And the double E faculty, the chair was saying, gee, we are paying you out of our funds, and therefore we would like you to work with our double E faculty. But I said, but I would like to do that. So they said, no, do not go behind our backs and look for support over there.
Mm,
Over there meaning the Institute of Optics.
right.
I went over there anyway
Okay.
to look and to talk around. And then it started to become apparent because many of the faculty said, gee, we have our own students that we have to support, that
Mm,
are in the optics program. You're a double E student. We have to take care of these guys first. So I said, but I tried to sell myself, but take a look at this. I've already passed the candidacy exam, you know.
yeah.
But they said, but you have to take then our candidacy exam in optics, not, which means you would have to, go back and do the graduate courses in optics. And so then it becomes this kind of a challenge. I did identify one professor who was going to take me on, but now at the same time, one of my colleagues that was a student with me back at City College who stayed in graduate school there said, hey, your buddy Professor Alfano has now made a joint faculty in electrical engineering, which
Mm,
now meant he would be able to take double E students to work under him. And so once I found that out, I went and gave him a call and went back and visited. And, starting the next fall semester, I transferred back to the City University of New York to work with Professor Alfano. And
right.
that's exactly how that went from undergraduate into optics and lasers, meeting Alfano, going to Rochester, trying to find my way there. There was not a lot of diversity there either, as you can imagine. So
Right.
support networks were zero basically, and so
Mm,
ultimately came back to New York and finished up my degree. Um,
okay. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that explanation. So you had like a very circuitous route.
yeah,
That's actually inspiring for a lot of people because from what I've experienced, some people don't really know exactly what route to go on at first, but some of these programs differ in various ways. But as long as I guess you can find an advisor that is willing to take you on and is helpful, that kind of makes all the difference.
That is correct. That is absolutely correct. I would like to say to the folks in the audience that continue to be passionate. We learn in our calculus class, or certainly in some of our electrodynamics class, that the integral can be independent of the path. Right? So you may start at point A and you want to get to point B. As long as you get there, it doesn't matter whether you go this way or that way. And so sometimes if you have to get to point B by taking the more scenic route, the more circuitous route, at least you get there. This is the important feature, never to give up or to say, no, I can't.
Right. That makes total sense. Thanks for that. So I after grad school, you graduate and then you have a PhD now, so you're at Delfyett. Can you describe your time at Bell Labs and the Bell Core Group? This was a time where Bell Labs was sort of at its zenith, and there were all these innovations happening. We have people like Jim West and others who are making like other seminal um
Contributions, yeah.
contributions to science. I think we had touched base a little bit in the past in the not too far away past. I had asked you for a contact for Dr. Gerard Alphonse, and he was at RCA Labs. And then from what I understand, his invention of the superluminescent diode was something that you drew upon. Could you speak about like just your time at Bell Labs? And I believe that's when you had innovated on the mode locked lasers, right?
That is exactly correct. So I had when I graduated, I had an opportunity I had several different opportunities to go to work at Hughes Research Lab in Malibu, to take a postdoctoral fellow position at Bell Laboratories at Homedale, or to take a fully fledged member of the technical staff position at Bell Communications Research right down the road in Red Bank. Homedale and Red Bank facilities were right next to each other. Of course, I decided to go to the member of the technical staff position. That was a permanent position there. And so they gave me an opportunity to work on a couple of different projects. And the one that I selected was to try to make these very short bursts of light, which we would have applications in terabit per second fiber optic communication networks. And they wanted me to make these light sources from semiconductor lasers, the kind of devices that are inside your laser pointer. And so that is a particularly difficult task. Um, but nonetheless, I decided to take it on. And as I started working on the problem, um, I noticed that there were some key challenges with using semiconductor lasers that you would basically kind of buy off the shelf, because when you put a current onto it, they laze directly. And what I wanted to do was to take one of these devices and put an optical resonator around it to allow the lights to bounce back and forth into this bigger cavity to make a short pulse. Well, the problem is when you wrap a cavity around another cavity, if you make a pulse, it's going to rattle around inside the laser chip. And so what comes out, instead of a clean, sharp burst of light, it comes out with a lot of ripple and modulation, not very, very good for communications, not very good for an optical logic bit. You want the logic bit to be completely on or completely off, not some indeterminate thing. Well, I don't know if it's on or off. Not one of those things. And
Right.
so, it was, I think, maybe 9 months in, I went to the Clio conference in May, and I saw that Jerry Alphonse at Sarnoff, the old RCA labs, were making these what looked like semiconductor laser diodes, but he converted them to being like semiconductor optical amplifiers or superluminescent devices. And when I
Right.
saw that, I said, that is exactly the kind of device I could put inside my external resonator and get rid of this rattling effect inside the irregular commercial laser diode. And so got in my car, drove over to Princeton, made a little pitch to the team at RCA or Sarnoff, and the guy said, gee, the guys at Sarnoff said, we don't do this ultra fast stuff. give the guy a few devices. Nothing,
Oh,
we have nothing to lose. If he does
right.
something great, put our names on the paper. And
Mm,
that was the start of a nearly decade long or more collaboration with myself, Jerry, and the other researchers at Sarnoff. So I got some of the devices, I took them back to the lab, I went underneath the microscope to wire bond them and solder them, put it in the external cavity, and after the first year at Belcor, I actually started to get very nice results, and then built upon that and broke the world's record. It was a very exciting time at Belcor. You have an opportunity to work with some of the world's best scientists, but it is a little daunting when you walk in there because you're the new kid on the block, right? Coming in as a fresh PhD, you haven't done a postdoc, but they've given you the responsibility to run an entire program by yourself. And
mm,
sometimes you feel like there are the very, very, very senior old guys that kind of look at you in the hallway and they're thinking, yeah, let's just sit back and eat our popcorn and see when this guy falls on his face, right?
I
Yeah,
see.
there is some of that as well. But, I did well. And so it all turned out to be very good in the end. I really enjoyed my time there. I spent 5 years total there.
Okay, wow. So that's amazing. And so it seems like with your innovations and then some of the inventions from Dr. Alphonse, it's kind of like these Black New Yorkers are kind of taking the optics world by storm kind of at that time.
Yeah,
And Bell
because
Labs.
there were not many black PhDs doing anything in optics. I mean, you
Mm,
had Anthony Johnson, you had myself. There was Artie Walter, who was a associate dean back at the City University. Now he was a classmate with me. There was Wendell Hill, who does short pulse
right.
lasers at Maryland College Park. I mean, we could count ourselves, on like two hands across the entire world. And so
Hmm.
it was nice that myself and Jerry could get together and make some of these impacts. It was truly nice. Absolutely.
Right. No, that's amazing. So I guess one question I had going forward, what do you think has been your most seminal work?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot.
Okay.
Well, like, what is your favorite invention or something like that? Um, there are several that are really noteworthy. One was just being able to understand the limiting physics of how you can make short pulse light from semiconductor lasers. We had broken the records year after year and improved, to the point where we had a bunch of patents and started a company, which wound up becoming successful. So there's that aspect. Then we also used our mode lock lasers, our semiconductor lasers for making optical clocks. And a lot of that started back at Belcor, but I sort of still do that work today. And we have some sort of record-setting performances in making what we call optical frequency combs from semiconductor laser systems and chip-scale lasers. And right now we're trying to use those for space photonic applications and communications, metrology, position timing, and navigation. So it's a short pulse, high power. There is the low noise aspect for clocks. And then we've been using the lasers for of applications related towards a host of applications related towards communication, signal processing, imaging, and radar. So those are kind of like the three big, really three big things we have, I believe, have made an impact in.
All right. Amazing. So Bell Labs, there's this, this zenith of, contributions and there was a heyday. And then there was this acquisition and things started to flounder a bit. But in 1993, you had already gone over to University of Central Florida. And could you kind of describe that journey?
Sure. And what was happening, I'll give everybody the whole spiel. Before 1984, Bell Laboratories and AT&T was one system. a thing. It was a monolith. And they were sued by MCI or Sprint.
Okay, I
Is
see.
some names there, right? And
Right.
so the lawsuit was that AT&T was a monopoly in that they owned the infrastructure, the network, the wires. They uh, and because they owned the infrastructure and the wires, they required Western Electric equipment, which was owned by AT&T, to be used on that, and then they provided the service as well. So they provided the
Ah,
service, they owned the infrastructure, and they mandated what equipment could or could not go in the network. And that basically sort of froze people out or forced other companies to try and duplicate that, to rebuild infrastructure very hard. So AT&T lost. They lost that. They were identified as a monopoly. So what happened was um, Judge Green split AT&T into two parts. And the Bell Laboratories, they split that into two parts. And what they did was half of AT&T became kept the name AT&T, which was then legally bound only to work on long distance communication. And then half of Bell Labs went with that arm of the organization. The other half of AT&T was split into what was called the seven baby bells or the regional bells, where you had, NYNEX, Pac West, Pacific Bell, Bell Atlantic, Bell South. These were the seven baby bells. And then that other half of Bell Laboratories, that was the research arm. And we were supposed to focus only on local area communications.
I
That
see.
model worked well until I think the early 90s when cable TV and cellular phones started to become more popular. And
Mm,
these new technologies were not governed by the loss settlement. And this meant baby bells could now compete with each other. And so the baby bells having one research arm started to worry that innovation by one baby bell company could leak over to another
mm,
because now they're able to compete. So that started to create a little bit of stress. That's number one. Number two, there was a lot of pressure being put on the technology companies from people in Wall Street to sort of make their stock more profitable. And so across all industries that had thriving research labs, across all of these industries, they all started to purge or squeeze on the long-term research to become much more shorter term. And this happened at places like IBM, Xerox, Hughes, Ford. I mean, any major industry that had any kind of research capability. And so that happened at Bell Labs, that happened at Bellcore as well. So right around in the sort of the early to mid 90s, you had this large migration, out of the industrial labs into academia. And I was one that sort of made that migration as well.
understood. Okay. Thanks for that detailed explanation. My grandfather was like a satellite engineer for Sprint. So I've heard like a little bit of this like through, Alcatel, Lucent,
Yes,
Nokia,
yes,
all of
correct. Because after Bell Labs split, then it became Lucent Bell Laboratories. Then it
them.
became Alcatel. Then it became Nokia. I think it's Nokia now. There might have
Yeah.
been something else in between. But yeah, the Bell Labs component has transitioned. The Bell Core component has transitioned and changed its name many times as well. That is
Right.
correct.
And then you were president of NSBP in 2013. Um,
Actually, I started my whole cycle from president-elect to past president because I'd served two terms. I think that
right.
was from 2008, and I ended in like 2012, I believe is what
Okay.
my time period was. Right after me, I think Paul Gay became president, and after Paul, Renee Horton became president. I think that's
Mhm.
how the lineage goes.
Okay,
Anyway, go
awesome.
ahead, ask the question.
No, no, thanks for that explanation.
Yeah.
So, can you speak to the organization and how things were going at that time and what do you see for the future? So yeah, just can you tell us like how NSBP was in the mid 2000s time, how it evolved, and then what advice would you give to students who are Black and in physics, and also what progression would you like to see from the organization going forward as a past president?
All right. Well, at the time of, let's say, 2005, this is a couple years before I got in. Um, there had been some challenges in terms of how NSBP was holding its annual meeting. We were
Hmm,
getting some funding from NSF, etc., and the sort of management or managing director at the time, um, and the folks at NSF that were giving the money just had a different perspectives on how things should be.
hmm,
And so and everyone has their own perspectives. The managing director believes that we are a separate, independent, legally ordained organization. We should be able to run our organization the way we like to.
right.
The NSF, who was giving hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, was saying, yes, we're giving a lot of this money, and we would like to see things done. We also appreciate the way you're doing things, but we would also like you to be considerate of some of the ways that we would like things to be done as well. And
Hmm,
so, there was this sort of differences in opinion. And so I would say during my tenure as president, I was able to work through those differences. I think is a good way to say that we were able to kind of fix those things. And so, because as a result, NSBP was in the red for a while, right?
right.
Because of that. And so we were able to kind of straighten things out and develop a path and a plan to get us in the black. And that's where we are today. Right. This is
Right.
it was a very challenging time for me, but this was part of the reason why I was asked to serve a second term, because I was making good progress on straightening features out, and all of the senior NSBP members said, let Peter continue to finish this stuff out. So I was very fortunate and blessed that I had the support of the very senior NSBP members that were senior when I was a student. So now, to your second question, let's see if I can rephrase that, or maybe you can rephrase that. What advice would I give students? Uh,
Right. What advice would you give students who are Black and in physics, and what progression would you like to see from the organization as a whole?
Right. And so, what advice would I give students who are doing physics? Um, sure. One important piece of advice. If you're doing physics, whatever it is, no matter how fundamental it is, the hope is, or try to at least be aware or cognizant, can there be something useful or an application that my new knowledge can create? This is becoming very important. Let me just give you one small story. Um, I had graduated with my PhD, and yeah, I had offers at Bell Labs, Bellcore, and Hughes, but I had some faculty offers as well. And I went to one particular place and was talking with either I don't know if it was a senior grad student and a very junior professor, and he was telling me about his work that he was doing in his physics department. And so I said, gee, what do you feel the future applications are? And his response was, my science is so pure, there are no applications. And I understand that. It's something that we might have loved to say 40 or 50 years ago, but that's not really the way it has to be now. Because immediately I said, gee, as a faculty, we have to write for grants. We have to convince someone to give us money. We have to show how there's going to be a return on their investment. Maybe that's me thinking like an engineer. I don't know. But I said, to have the thinking that that your work is so pure that there are no applications, that's a harder sell to get money. That's a harder sell. You've got if you've got Nobel Prize after your name, maybe you can pull that off. But as me as a young professor, that's not something that I can do. So the
Right.
advice I give to the young students, no matter what the physics is, try to be aware of what sort of application their science and their new knowledge can bring to humanity. Now, with respect to where would I like to see the organization go, this is something that I had always tried to pitch when I was president, that NSBP, uh, and I would need to look at the current student membership, but I believe many of the students are sort of physics students, I'm assuming.
Right.
I would love to see that net to be cast a little wider because I'm an electrical engineer, but I do physics as well.
Right.
There are some people that are chemists, but they're doing chemical physics. And so instead of looking at membership for students which are just physics, if we could, we broaden the net where we can bring in folks which are, doing good science, but might be material scientists. They might be computer scientists, right? Because now quantum aspects of physics is getting
Right.
into computer science, right? And so if we really want to take advantage of where society is moving, we see that science is becoming very, very interdisciplinary, right? Even
Right.
the Nobel Prize in physics this year was given to guys doing, AI, right? And
Okay.
so that is the kind of vision I'm hoping for the organization, that we somehow have the ability to attract other students in, let's say, material science, computer science, engineering, electrical, mechanical, whatever it is, etc., into the fold at NSBP. Because physics is truly the underlying science of almost all of those things. Those fields grew out of physics, right? Material science, engineering, all of that grew out of physics. So I would like to. I would like to see that. That'd be great.
Oh, thanks for that. Yeah, I mean, one thing I've been trying to explain to people sometimes is that, this new Nobel Prize is the fact that it's for these AI innovators is because of the Ising model that they were working on. This is statistical physics that happened to explode in computer science. So there, everything is interconnected. So
That is correct.
before we get to these audience questions, there's some audience members. You should put your questions in the Q&A box, and I'll do my best to try to answer all of them and read them out loud to Dr. Delfyett here. But perfect segue to my last question, which was, what new landscapes in physics are you most excited for? So we have this quantum computing, we have
Sure.
new advances in atomic physics and lasers. What really do you see going forward is the most exciting for you?
So there are. So let me. I'll address that in two questions, two answers. I will try to identify all of the exciting areas that I think are going on. Then I'll try to then focus on the exciting areas that I am that I am personally involved in.
Okay.
So exciting areas in physics. Obviously, quantum aspects of science and entanglement and its applications are important, whether it's quantum computing or quantum teleportation, using entanglement for signal processing, etc. That's one area. Another interesting area of physics is what I call the uh, extreme laser science. This is developing pulse durations, in the attosecond regime, looking at the fundamental dynamics and structure of matter. There's also instead of just the temporal extreme of attoseconds, there is the brightness extreme, where people get these huge football-sized lasers, football field-sized laser systems, and create intensities of approaching 10 to the 23, 10 to the 24 watts per centimeter squared. It's
Wow.
focused down into a micron spot. If you could get that power up to 10 to the 29 watts per centimeter square in vacuum, you would actually create proton, antiproton particles. So the concept of energy creating matter could be done. That's what we call the
Wow.
Schwinger limit. That is another ultimate. What else is the ultimate? There is the ultimate in timing and frequency metrology. These new types of optoatomic clocks, where we're measuring time down to an accuracy of 21 decimal points. This is the extra, and we're applying these light sources to measure the structure of the universe,
Right.
etc. We're trying to make tabletop gravity wave sensors based on the sensitivity of optical frequency combs. So instead of having LIGO out in Livingston, Louisiana, or Hansford, Washington, we could have tabletop size gravity wave detectors inside the laboratory. Uh,
Right.
these are just some of the interesting areas. So I said gravity waves, I said atomic clocks, I said attoseconds, and I did the high field physics. Um, there's a lot going on in artificial intelligence and AI for sure as well. So
Mhm.
now there's probably more, but those are the ones that are in my mind. Uh,
Right.
and for any of the audience, if I didn't mention your specialized area, please forgive me. I'm sure it is important as well. But now, what am I doing that I think is important? Growing up in the 60s and 70s, one of the TV shows was Star Trek. And at the beginning of the show, the first thing out of Captain Kirk's mouth is space, the final frontier. And so this is what I'm trying to do, since I was making light sources for applications in terrestrial networks, fiber optic networks, and data centers, etc. We want to try and take these technologies and put them out on satellites as an example. And the
Mm.
whole environment is different. There's radiation that you have to deal with. Will your devices survive? If we're making novel types of atomic clocks, etc., the gravitational fields in different orbits, whether it's low Earth orbit, geosynchronously orbit, lunar orbits, Martian orbits, the gravitational fields are all different. Therefore, your clocks run differently. How do you make sure things are coherent? Pardon the pun, but literally,
Yeah.
these are some of the things that I'm trying to work on to take our chip scale lasers, make sure that they can survive the radiation, make sure they can survive liftoff, developing some of the new communication uh, um, protocols that we would be using to do high bandwidth communications at satellites, which are hundreds of kilometers apart, moving at thousands of meters per second. You know, these things are transmitting terabits per second, moving at 60,000 miles per hour. And you're aiming the laser from one satellite, trying to hit another one 100,000 kilometers away, moving at the speed of a meteor. Right.
Right.
Yeah, these are some of these are engineering challenges, but boy, the science is great. And if you're successful, you can really make a tremendous impact on humanity.
Excellent. Yeah. Thanks so much for answering that. That's really, I'm sure the audience will kind of take that into consideration.
Yeah,
We
I
also
wanted
have
to
a,
mention one other area. Sorry, there's a
sure.
lot of interesting area in biophysics,
Mm.
biophotonics, using light to go inside the cells, inside the nucleus of cells, and watch how the organelles are doing things to understand the biochemistry that's going on, looking at things, monitoring things in real time, being able to image stuff that's smaller than the wavelength of light. So some of these new types of imaging modalities are making tremendous advances in the medical and biophotonics field.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for that mention as well. There's a ton of applications, so I'm sure the audience will chew on that. So we have a question here from William Phillips. He says, today's political climate has made ideas like diversity into dirty words. Those of us doing research in the trenches experience diversity as the quote unquote secret sauce that allows difficult problems to be solved by diverse teams. Could you say a bit about this phenomenon from your own experience?
For sure, I think diversity is critical because diversity brings people from varying backgrounds with different perspectives and different problem-solving skills. It's going to be hard to build a square cube from a bunch of round spheres, right? If everybody is a round sphere and the goal is to create a perfect square cube with flat faces, the round spheres will only be able to create a poor facsimile of that. And so I think the ability of having tremendously diverse backgrounds really helps in problem solving. And in my particular case, um, when my group was as big as it was at one point, I had 20 people in my group. I would have my Pakistani student working with my Indian student. I would I would have my my Israeli student working with my Palestinian student, right? I would have my Japanese student working with my Korean student, my Greek student working with my Turkish student. And I say these specifically because these are countries that were arch enemies of each other over millennia. And I could just see the wonderful teamship that these people could have, and so this idea of people being separate and working in their own worlds um, is really an impediment to moving the forefront of knowledge. And so in my case, when my group was that big, it was one of the most productive times in my career. I think we were publishing 16 journal papers a year, you know, out of the group, which is quite a clip, as you can probably imagine. But that was because I had a diverse bunch of people working together as a team. And I really try to foster the idea that if one person in the team is struggling and is losing, then the entire team is losing. But if one person in the team is winning, then we all can win as well. And we have to support that kind of model.
Right. Thank you for that. Yeah, I believe that there's a
Now,
lot
let me ask, was that Bill Phillips like the Nobel Prize, Bill Phillips?
we can only ask.
Yeah,
Uh,
because I know Bill Phillips does like to participate in some of our NSBP activities. Anyway, but
he says yes.
oh, it was. Oh, good.
Okay.
How are you,
Very,
sir? It is so good to see you.
yeah,
Just
very.
to give you another story. This was back when Professor Phillips, right before he won the Nobel Prize. We're at the FIO, the Optical Society of America's annual meeting in October. It's like the Monday night, and we're at the fellows dinner or whatever it is. Maybe it was the conference reception on Wednesday, I forget. And I'm talking with Professor Phillips, and we're talking about the Orlando Science Center, and I'm saying, yes, we need to have you come down and give a talk, etc. It was on a Monday for sure, because I remember waking up at like 6 or 6:30 on the Tuesday morning and seeing on the news that Bill Phillips won the Nobel Prize, and I said, I guess he's not coming to visit us. So
Oh no.
anyway, I wanted to share that story with him. I'm not sure if he remembers, but
I I'm I am very happy that we were able to get that story onto this interview, so I appreciate that. And he says, doing great, thanks for your right on insights. So we also have a question from Nkiru Campbell Ubadike, and she asks, what are your hobbies and do they connect to your professional work?
excellent question. So, what are my hobbies? Drumming. I like to play drums, and I like to do salsa dancing. Now, what's important in drumming? You are the timekeeper. What's important in dancing salsa? Keeping on time. What kind of research do we do? For optical frequency combs for time and frequency metrology. So, so in some sense, the timing aspect of my research somehow has evolved into my hobbies, or maybe I should say it the other way around, because I was playing drums way before I was doing lasers, and
Hmm.
so that's just an interesting parallel that playing a drummer and being in tune to timing has led to me to pursue the use of lasers for clocks, as an example.
Okay, very nice. Yeah, from what I understand, people who have, you know, uh hobbies that enrich them, that will be very enriching on the other end of you doing the science. Scientists are people, so we all
Right.
need some outlet of some sort. So
That's correct. That's
thank you.
correct.
Thank you for humanizing that aspect of it because I think a lot of people see like, oh man, like these people are doctorates and they may look up to a lot of what you do, but you are a human being, so we appreciate you beyond just the huge accomplishments that you've done.
Sure. It is true. Scientists are regular people. You know, we put both socks on at one time, right? No, just joking. But it's
Yeah,
important
or
for
one
us
at a
to
time.
have outlets, and it's good for work-life balance.
For sure. So if I'm looking for some more questions from the audience if there are any. Um, is there any way for Dr. Delfyett, is there any way for people to connect to your work through maybe publications or looking at the University of Central Florida? Are you looking for more students, things of that nature?
So to be able to figure out, what we're doing, you can go to the UCF webpage. Our webpage at Creole is www.creole, CREOL, UCF, like University of Central Florida, .edu. And if you go over to the tab that says people and drop down and click faculty, you'll see my name and my picture. And if you click on that, it'll go to my web page, which will describe some of the work that we're doing, and it will list some of our most recent publications as an example. That's one way. Students can also use Google Scholar and just type in my name, and you can see, depending upon how they order the return queue in terms of what's been highly cited. So, oh, that's popular, or they can order it in terms of what is published most recently to see what we're doing. And of course, I'm always looking for students, but my ability to take students on is always a function of how much money we have in the kitty. Because as a grad student, I actually recognize that running a research group is a little bit like a business. The money comes in, your students are your employees, your product are your papers, your patents, and your students. And so it's all a function of budget flow to some degree.
Okay, understood. So our last question for today will also come from Nkiru. So she says, what is your hope for political/community action in the K through 12 space in terms of increasing the pipeline of African American students specifically?
Could you repeat that? You broke up a little bit.
What is your hope for political/community action in the K through 12 space in terms of increasing the pipeline of African American students specifically?
I think we need to, despite whatever is going on in the federal government, we cannot afford to let up off our pressure on the gas pedal for DEI activities in K through 12. We have to push on that. Yes, if the federal funding is dwindling, we just sort of have to continue to push and make that happen. What we have done here, because as you know, I'm in Florida, and those issues have been on attack, before the current administration. And so one way that we have, I don't want to say gotten around it, but modified it. We sort of changed the name on how things are done, but still make sure that we are working in ways that we can kind of continue to increase diversity and maintain access. For the young folks out there, when I was a grad student, I would routinely go to the middle schools, in Harlem, and bring little widgets and toys and a little handheld laser, my little helium neon laser, that my dad had bought me for Christmas when I was an undergraduate, and I would take it to the middle schools because I think middle school is probably the most critical point. But I would try to show kids and talk about what lasers are to get them excited. Those kinds of things, I think, are important. And the reason why I always like to say middle school is important is because, between sixth grade and ninth grade is sort of when you're evolving from being a younger child to a mature adult, right? And by the time you get in high school, if you haven't used the middle school time period to make sure you stay on top of doing math and science, and you don't do that and get to high school, then doing well in math and science in high school gets harder. And then if you're not doing well in math and science in high school, you then either have to redo that in college, which slows you down, or it may make it difficult for you to get into the physics or engineering program that you want to get into. And so I hope that the young students out there in NSBP will still think about continuing to do their outreach to their local middle schools and high schools and elementary schools, because we have to plant the seeds as early as we can, and we have to continue to water those seeds in order for us to flourish as a community.
Right. Thank you for those words, Dr. Delfyett. So it seems that we do not have any more questions, but it is right on time to transition to ending this broadcast here. But we definitely appreciate the time. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. You know, you are very productive, so we appreciate you taking the time out. Again, you're available through the University of Central Florida, and thank you for being here. Thank you for coming.
Sure. I mean, if people were to just type my last name or my name in Google, stuff will come up. You'll find my email address, things of that nature. So I'm very easy. I'm very easy to find. As the expression goes in my old neighborhood, we know where you live, and so the students can find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm going to end our recording now, and then I will sign off. So thank you so much. And tune in. We will have more broadcasts with NSBP for Black History Month. Thank you.
Thank you, and I want to thank the audience for participating.
No problem.
Bye.